everybody. I'm Danni Danger, and we are with Screen Fanatic. This is crossover event. That was terrible. I just got all my words, all word salady.
Did you? Because that was accurate.
I mean, it was. I just feel like I did things in the wrong order because I didn't say, this is crossover event with Screen Fanatic and oneofus.net. But that feels very specific, and I'm going to say we should just go with it. Just roll with it.
I like it.
Yeah.
All gas, no brakes. Let's do this.
Chris isn't here.
He's not here. That's what I was going to say. He's not here. He can't stop us.
Yeah, it's the animals running the zoo. Here we are.
He's just watching at home, impotently going like, no!
I'm Danni Danger.
And I'm Martin Thomas.
And I'm Harris O'Malley.
Yeah, welcome to Crossover Event. Today we are talking about the first piece of media or experience that got us into comic books. The egg in which we all became little nerd dinosaurs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. If in case you actually want to know that, because I'm sure you all have a story, and when it's your time to tell it, you can. So today we'll tell ours. Mine would go back to before any of you were born, of course.
Imagine it.
Imagine if you will. You'd have to go back to the early 70s. It might even be a little bit before that. And I always credit the the original 1967 Spider-Man cartoon, which was animated by Ralph Bakshi. It was I would say Landry Gantz was the name of the company. Anyway, you guys have all seen it. The famous song Spider-Man does whatever Spider-Man comes from, that they've found a way to incorporate it in every one of these live action movies in some way or another. But as a kid, my biggest thing was because I was by myself. I grew up as a only child whose third parent was the television, especially cartoons. And between Spider-Man, Ultraman, and Speed Racer, those were my introductions to all the geek media that I came to love. As a matter of fact, I credit Spider-Man as what made me want to become an artist. And even as I grew up, I always imagined myself as that particular Spider-Man. Climbing walls.
I bet your folks loved that.
Having spider sense. It's spider sense, not Spidey sense, like everybody keeps saying. God damn it, that drives me nuts.
The hill that Martin died on.
Yeah, only on
it
this.
Was a small hill.
Only on this particular show.
But how do you feel about the hyphen? Is it Spider-Man or Spider-Man?
It actually is. Technically, it is Spider-Man.
It's true.
Yeah, no, it is. If you're not putting a hyphen in, you're spelling it wrong.
So how'd you make the transition from cartoons to like going into a comic book shop and doing the reading?
Okay. So that's the thing. So yeah, it was always the cartoons for me, right? It wasn't until I was a little bit older. I was still in elementary school. I think it was 5th grade, and back during those times. Unlike you kids can't imagine this now, but parents didn't keep up with what you did. You could leave the house.
I remember that
at 10 in the morning,
the sunset of those
and
days.
go all over your neighborhood into other neighborhoods, and your parents did not care until the street light above your house came on. Usually around 6 o'clock, depending on daylight savings time, and your ass better be home then, because if that street light came on and you weren't home, you could look up and find your parents stalking down the street for you, usually with a weapon in their hand. But hey, man, those were the rules. You knew that when you left.
Time.
Yep.
So if you got that spanking, hey, you took it because you're like, well, I violated protocol, so that was it. But one of the things that was in a neighborhood adjacent to ours, it wasn't even really in my neighborhood, was a record store / head shop that sold blacklight posters. One of the Wile E. Coyote having anal sex with the Roadrunner. That was.
So this is like a proto Spencer's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Or apparently a proto-archive of our own.
Yeah. But it also sold comic books.
Yeah, well, of course.
You're
Where
like,
else would you find
what does that have to
comic
do with the
books?
question you just asked me?
Oh no, I'm here for this story. I'm 100%
Oh,
invested.
same.
Yeah.
No. There was a comic book, and it was I meant to look it up before I got here, because it was some kind of odd Marvel team-up book. And most of the Marvel team-up books were always Spider-Man and somebody, or you had Marvel 2-in-1 that was Ben Grimm, The Thing, and somebody. It was somebody different every month. But for whatever reason, this one was Iron Man and the Human Torch. Yeah, I know. You get that.
Yeah,
look,
that's a pairing you don't see very often.
Yeah, you don't, because other than having red and yellow costumes, what these two have in common?
Competing for attention.
I suppose. You know what? You're right. when you're the Human Torch, you are like, I have all the attention. Who's going to pay attention to anything else? But that was the very first comic book I ever bought. I had it stolen from me by a bully, but I always remember that was the first one. Whatever the title it was, I think it was issue number 57. And from that point, it became a thing where I would buy comics whenever I had a chance. And there weren't really comic book stores at the time. It was just convenience stores and grocery stores. And there was an Avengers comic I remember buying when our parents forced us to go live with our aunt in Tunis, Texas, which is a tiny little town outside of College Station. Now, I won't say that we were forced, like, we were like, I can't take care of you, here you kids go. It was just one of those things during the summer when they were like, yeah, get out of our hair, you're going to go live with your aunt for 2
I'm
months.
like, is that even around still? Because I'm from Bryan College Station. I've
Oh, you
never heard of Tunis,
Tunis?
Texas.
Yeah.
They do a Christmas special every year. Tunis Christmas.
I assume that it's
Local
like
joke.
A shorter form of Tunisia, probably, the way Texas towns work.
Yeah. What?
But that was my only
Okay.
highlight, is that during the 2 weeks, the 2 months we'd be there, every 3 weeks our aunt would take us into town, into Bryan.
Into town.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Brian being into town is
Yes.
that's a whoa. That's a
I
thing.
understand.
Yes.
This
Where
resonates on a deep level.
I could spin the rack and buy an Avengers comic.
Oh!
And that was back when I think in the early days with George Perez just starting on the Avengers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And that was what really hooked me on just going from watching cartoons to actually being a comic book reader, but also because of, like I said, I was a kid and I watched these cartoons and I drew all the time. This elevated that to where I was just somebody, the actual creating art, that was where that was born for me.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where getting encouragement early, when you're young and you do something, people go like, oh, wow, you're good at that. It makes you want to keep doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what it helps you get better. So, yeah, I don't know. As far as my first, that was it.
Okay. Where did those Avengers comics end up? Like the actual physical copies of the...
Well, I always held on to my comics.
Okay.
And I wasn't a collector. There was no bagging. Bagging board wasn't even a thing then.
Yeah.
But I held on to them for quite a while. But you move and things get lost, and that's what happens.
Okay.
And then they become part of graphic novel collections and all. And now, I still own those comics, but just digitally from Comixology.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you were one of the people who has like one of those heart-wrenching stories of like, I had Avengers number XXX in perfect condition and my mom threw it away. Damn it, Mom.
No. As much as my dad wanted to throw my comic books away, he stopped short of doing that. And there's so many of them I held on to, not that one in particular. On the flip side, I met a guy once, and he threw a party, and we were at his house, and he took us to his back bedroom, and he had a great collection of the original Star Wars figures. Oh. Yeah. All in the box. Oh. All in mint.
Like, no, you don't understand. That's like 5 kids is like college fund right there.
Yeah, no.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. I go, wow, this is amazing. Worth so much money. How much did you spend on these? Oh, no, I bought these originally. Wait. And they're still in the package? Yes. My mom bought them for me, but she wouldn't let me open them. And I thought, that is the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's one thing that they're worth so much money, sure, but he's still holding on to them. Like, he's not going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But his mom was so into the collector mentality that you have the greatest toys in the world, and she won't let you play with them.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. Cause like I mean, there are so many. Like I've bought one or two Golden Age comics in like a good or like okay condition, specifically because first of all, I'm not rich, but second of all, the benefit to not being rich and only being able to afford those lower grades is that like I feel like part of the joy of owning something that's a part of history is being able to like flip through it and actually look at the ads and enjoy it, and once or twice before I bag and board it or frame it. And so like I get the collector mentality, and by all means, like if you like open something from your childhood and are like, oh, I'm a gazillionaire now, that's nifty, good for you, love that for you.
Yeah.
But it is I that resonates with me. Like I can't imagine being a child who like I had a family member who collected Barbies, and I remember how miserable it was looking at all of these like Barbies that I couldn't play with.
Yeah.
And just being like, oh, that Barbie's never going to be loved. That Barbie doesn't care. That Barbie's an inanimate object.
Well, it's also like especially back in the day, because all of us are old, there wasn't any such thing as getting like a guaranteed graphic novel collection or a reprint or a digital edition. And so like a lot of times the only ways you could ever see these like legendary stories is by combing through back issues and finding the one store that had a really, really bad copy. Of whatever it was you were looking for. The day that I found a copy of X-Men versus Teen Titans, that was a thing of legend when I was growing up. And finding that on the back wall of a store was just like, can I just read it? Can I just flip through it once?
Yeah, and of course, like my experience in comic book shops is there's always like some grumpy old guy who's like, no, you can't.
Wow, I might actually have my original copy of that. I should.
Yeah,
I would happily give it to you. I would love for it to have a good home.
Guys,
I would love
assuming
that.
I still have it, but I will look for it.
Cool. I'm gonna make sure to hide all of my eBay sales, but you know.
All right, Danny, what about you?
So when I was growing up, again, like cartoons are the gateway.
They're the gateway.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah. So for me, it was very much Batman in the animated series, Superman Adventures, the X-Men series.
Sure. Spider-Man, Justice League.
Yeah. But the big ones I think were X-Men, Batman the animated series, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
You grew up in a golden age.
I really did.
Because cartoons had hit a dark age prior to Batman coming out.
Yep.
And that ushered in this whole new golden age.
Yeah, and it really did. And there was some great media available to me as a kid, which is great because I also was a latchkey kid of a different generation. And, so I would come home and my mom worked late and, I was definitely babysat by the TV, and I wanted to be April O'Neil so bad. I was obsessed with April O'Neil. I loved her. Michelangelo was my favorite turtle, still is, but April O'Neil was just my favorite. I also really loved Lois Lane, from the Superman cartoon. And so like there was definitely a vein of that geekiness and that superhero love in me growing up.
Sure.
But I didn't, but I also, being the child of a single mother, who is very much a Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock movie kind of mom.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that tracks.
Yes, there was definitely some. I didn't get exposed to a lot of really like core cinema until later in life. So like I didn't see the original Star Wars trilogy until I was 21 years old.
Okay.
And because it just wasn't something that like sort of crossed my path. I did. A lot of the things that were geeky that crossed my path in my preteen and teen years were more of like due to them being like a fad or a hit. Like The Matrix was a really big one.
Sure. That was big for everybody.
Yeah, The Matrix, Blade, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I definitely had, was exposed to those things, but I didn't really get into comics until I moved to Austin and I started leasing apartments for, because I leased apartments back then. I leased an worked in a leasing office where one of our part-time maintenance guys was also a special effects makeup artist.
Okay.
And he was like, hey, I just got this, airbrusher, and I would love to paint you. Would you be interested in modeling and hanging out and just,
Wow.
shooting the shit? And so, he did like this
And then
full...
Chris Hansen asked him to sit down over there.
Yeah, he did this full, like, sort of tigress, actually, kind of makeup look. And it was great, and we did, like, this fun photo shoot. He also had this animatronic Michelangelo turtle that he was building that was so friggin' cool. And so I was just, like, really obsessed. Like, I was like, oh my god, you have, like, these things on your wall are really cool. I love the Ninja Turtles. Like, let's chat about that. And at the end of shooting, we were both exhausted, so we got a bunch of snacks. And he was like, just randomly, like, I want you to watch this animated movie. You said you like animation. So he put on the animated Wonder Woman movie with Kerry Russell and Nathan Fillion.
Oh, wow. Was that the first one?
It was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like her animated origin story. And I loved it. I mean, for obvious reasons. Like, there's so much chemistry between both of the two characters.
Sure.
There was really for 2010, there was some nuanced conversation in that movie about gender and gender roles. And I was just fascinated, and I loved it. And I think like a week later, I rolled into Austin Books and Comics and was like, someone help me find a comic book.
Wow.
You just go into any place of business. That's one of the ways that you can weaponize being a femme, is that you can just go into any place and look around like a lost child for a little while, and somebody will offer to help you find something because you just look lost.
Well, in a comic book store, if a woman comes in, which is a rare thing in itself, and asks for help, you probably get the entire staff, if not some of the customers, going like, oh, I can help you.
So what's interesting is that led into that whole mindset right there is what led into me working for Austin Books and Comics for 8 years.
Yeah.
And so I went in and somebody helped me find some books. The first books I did pick up like a random volume of Gail Simone's Wonder Woman, which was all right. It was, it was okay. But that was the first trip to the comic book store that got me started on Why the Last Man.
Oh, okay.
And so it was Why the Last Man, which very quickly moved into the classic Vertigo stuff, all right? Fables, Sandman. And then from there, I was just kind of roaming the shop and picking up things that looked cool to me and characters that I enjoyed. And every time I would go in, I would talk with somebody from the staff to get like their picks, and kind of got to know people that worked there. And New Comic Book Day was coming up. And so I was like, hey, do you guys take volunteers? I would love to volunteer. And so just went and did Free Comic Book Day, had such a good time. And then they offered me a job that day.
That's awesome.
And that was sort of the premise, right? It was like, you have less exposure to this stuff. You are new to comics, but you have this way of talking to people who don't think they're into this thing and saying like, hey, and that was my favorite thing to do when I worked at the comic book shop, was like, if somebody came in, usually a couple with, the femme half of the couple kind of looking around like they didn't want to be there, or we're just sort of waiting.
My boyfriend while he does
we're just waiting for him to run his errand. I'd be like, I would take it as a challenge and be like, hey, okay, so like, what do you like to watch on TV? What do you like to read about? What's your favorite genre? I guarantee you there's a comic book out there for you. You don't have to buy it, but the least I can do is give you something to flip through to entertain yourself while you're waiting for somebody else to run their errand, so that way you're not kind of following behind that person being like, okay, hurry up.
Yeah.
And so it just became like a thing, and I worked there for 8 years, and I would really love to be able to still work for pennies on the dollar doing something that I love.
I think you'd love to get paid a living wage to do something that you love.
Yeah, and it's, it's tough, right? Like, oftentimes some of the most rewarding jobs are the ones that don't pay the best.
Always.
But I really enjoyed my time there. It led to, it's how I ended up here sitting in this seat doing this. So, I'm very grateful for it.
So let me ask you this, because Wonder Woman was the thing that got you into it.
Yes, yeah.
And there's been so many different runs of Wonder Woman. What's been your favorite?
So, it's hard to find Wonder Woman comics that are specifically about Wonder Woman that I really love. A lot of them often just come out kind of meh. Her Rogues Gallery is kind of eh. I think the first portrayal of Wonder Woman that I read in the comics that I was just like, this is my girl. I love her. This is perfect. Quintessential Wonder Woman was New Frontier by Darwin Cook.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just when she, like, when you see her going head to head with Superman and she's taller than him.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you don't tell me and these other women how to deal with patriarchal violence. You can GTFO.
Yeah.
I was just like, yes, Mama,
no,
yes.
you're right. That is a great run. Because I always feel like that, like so many of the runs of Wonder Woman, you're like, man, this is almost there.
Yeah.
It's like they're afraid to remember that she comes from a warrior culture.
Yeah.
But they still have to kind of hold on to the whole, but superheroes don't kill. Superheroes find they always find the third way. And it's like, no, Wonder Woman's the sort of person who's like, look, we try not to, but sometimes someone's got to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am not for superheroes killing people. I don't think Batman should and all that. But when she killed Max Lord, I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
That was just seeing a problem. It's like, there is only one way to solve this.
Yeah, it is literally, if I let you live, there is literally nothing that anybody can stop you, because you've got mind control powers.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
all right.
Yeah, it's, and the interesting thing about being like a Wonder Woman fan is that like I'm very interested in her progression over the years. Like obviously her creation is a whole like pot of
it's such a thing.
It's a thing. And then and then you get into like, oh well, all of this bondage is too controversial for children's comics, so we're gonna put her in a white suit and we're gonna make her really bland and boring and then just like her evolution through time and her looks and
the dark period in the 90s where they gave her like the half jacket and the
when she was dressed like a fly girl.
And just so that's like, I think that's really fascinating to me. But I think that rather than like being a huge like diehard collector of Wonder Woman comics, I think Wonder Woman was the foot in the door for other characters that didn't have as much exposure that I now follow religiously, like She-Hulk. I will read any She-Hulk title, doesn't matter who writes it. I adore her. She's great. And characters I think like that, I think she really just like opened the door for those kinds of characters for me.
Yeah.
And just generally into comics. Like I have a giant Wonder Woman tattoo from here to here now. Like it's what Identity Crisis #4, the one where she's like, it's all dark and she's just like lit by the glow of her lasso.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like, which again, that was a terrible series. It was an awful series.
Awful. I know.
I will go on record.
I know.
But the art was so good.
But it was so good. Yeah, it was so awful and it was so good. It was bad. It was like snakes on a plane.
Oh God, I love that.
I love that too.
It's some of my favorite things. Is like, it's so bad it's good. Oh, and then the flip side of that is this is so good and it has absolutely no right to be, which is like everything that Marvel did during what was it? Where all of the multiverses crashed together.
Crisis?
Battle World and
it's like Battle, like they did like a series in like Battle World, and they did a series.
Called?
Oh God, it was
why am I blanking on that? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Final Crisis or
no? It wasn't Final Crisis.
It was Marvel. And it was sort of like their Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yes, yeah, it was like all the multiverses, all the multiverses kind of smooshing
Dr.
together.
Doom was in control of everything.
Yeah, it'll come to me as
Secret
soon
Wars
as
or
Secret Wars. Yes.
Okay.
Because I was gonna say it was already a previous Marvel event.
That's right. Because they've done so many. They did 2 other Secret Wars before.
It was
that,
it was like Armor. It was like Armor Wars versus Marvel Zombies and stuff like that. And I was like, this is all so conceptually bad. Why is this so well written?
Yeah.
Why is the art so good?
Right. Yeah.
Who said you could do this?
Yeah.
So those are 2 special places in my heart. Anyway, that's off topic. Harris, I want to hear what brought you into the fold.
Well, I think like everybody else, a lot of mine came from cartoons as well. When I was growing up, comics were very much a thing that like my parents got when I was 6, so I didn't really have much control over what I got.
Oh. Okay.
So a lot of times, like if I was at my grandmother's, she had a stack of old Gold Key comics, so it had a lot of like Roadrunner comics and Bugs Bunny comics, and the Roadrunner comics always weirded me out because the Roadrunner had a family and they all talked.
Oh.
And just like, what the hell is this? And it had ads in the back, too, for stuff like Doc Spectrum, Man of the Atom, and a whole bunch of, like, superheroes I'd never heard of.
But all the cool comics you wanted to read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, most of what I got my comics knowledge from, and, like, a lot of my superhero knowledge from, was from cartoons, like you guys were saying. Because that was at the time of Super Friends. So that's how I got a lot of my DC characters. Or, the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which is what introduced me to the X-Men and the oddly Australian Wolverine and French and French Nightcrawler. Go figure. So I got a lot of like cultural osmosis from those, and every once in a while I get a Batman comic or a Superman comic. There was another show that was on that is one of those 80s cartoons that apparently I'm the only person who remembers, in this weird Berenstain Bear thing called the Kids Superpower Hour with Shazam.
Oh no, I remember that.
And it had it had like all of the Shazam stuff. So like when Shazam and all of the the Lieutenant Marvels show up in the DC comics at the time, because at the time they were a different universe and I believe a different publisher. That was a big thing.
They started with Fawcett, but then they got bought. Well, they got sued and then bought by DC.
So like a lot of like my early memories were just like these random like dropped into the middle of the storyline comics. Like there was one that was a Masters of the Universe Superman crossover that again just dropped in the middle of it because why not? But the very first time. Like, and some of the comics that I got as a kid were way messed up. Like, I should not have been reading them. One of my first memories of reading a Batman comic was an Alan Moore story called The Spider's Ninth Leg.
I've
Good.
never heard of
You're
this one.
fine.
You can find that one in the like Alan Moore DC Omnibus.
Okay.
If you can still find that, because Alan Moore and DC do not get along.
No, I know that, but I thought that I had gone through that one, and I don't remember that.
Yeah, it's like a guy that like Batman's chasing falls off a roof, and you're seeing his entire life about how he got to that point. And while he's doing this, he's kind of in this weird afterlife where the spider is crawling up to him and is getting bigger and bigger. And it gets up really close, and all of a sudden, another leg comes out of the middle of it and stabs him in the forehead. And it's just
Jesus.
yeah.
So you turned out totally fine.
Oh
is
no,
what
I'm
you're saying.
great. Yeah, no, that's totally an appropriate thing for a 6-year-old to read.
Huh? Maybe Dr. Fred Wortham had a point.
But the first comic
No.
I ever bought for myself that blew my mind was Crisis on Infinite Earths #6.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
you know the one. It's the one with Superman doing the Pieta holding Supergirl screaming and all of these characters in the background going like looking sad. I see this at my local 7-Eleven. I'm like, I need to know what's going on. And I'm reading through this going like, okay, I recognize some of these heroes, some of these I've never heard of. What do you mean they just killed Supergirl?
Oh yeah.
Like, what? No, that's not how this happens. So, of course, I have to, like, get the next one, because I totally understood at the time how comics worked. I did manage to find the next one, which was then the death of the Flash. And again, it's like, what the living hell is this?
Yeah.
I have to know more. And, like, again, this was at a time when I did not know that comic stores were a thing, and they barely were, especially in San Antonio. But it wasn't a year later that I discover almost entirely by accident a store in San Antonio called The Dungeon, and it was a RPG and comic store. And walking into that, it's like the doors open, my eyes are adjusting to this big dark room, and as soon as I can see, all of a sudden it's like a shaft of light is coming down, and there's this angelic choir, and it is just row after row of comics. And in the back there was the back issue section, so I'm just like, oh, I can fill in all the rest. I got all the Crisis, and I'm reading that entire thing, and just like it was the most amazing experience. And just that moment of having my mind blown of, oh God, this is serious. Weird, like.
I'm in the shit now.
Yeah, this whole world that existed that you didn't even know.
Well, not only that, but also just like that, like Crisis breaking the rules of like Superman's getting the living snot beat out of him. Supergirl gets beaten to death.
Yeah.
That's not how this works. Like, my God, all my Saturday morning cartoons, I'd already accepted that there is no such thing as plot progression.
Oh, okay. I guess I can see that, because by the time you got to Crisis, I'd already experienced in comics the death of Jean Grey, the Dark Phoenix, and Elektra, and those were affecting. Where it was because it was before they kept killing characters and bringing them back.
I was gonna say these days everybody's died at least once.
Have you died yet? No. Yeah, you will. Don't worry about it. You'll be back.
Wait till May.
Yeah. Or like one of the best Peter David gags I've ever seen. There was an issue of X Factor where Banshee has died, and his niece Siren refuses to believe that he's actually dead, and she's just sitting there going like, "Yep, he'll be back any minute now. Any minute now. Any minute." That's how the comic ends. Just her sitting there going like, "He'll be back any minute now." Just walking through that door.
Oh.
It's like, you hurt me.
Yeah, you don't think something like that can affect you. And it's not about being young. It's just you've been following this for a while, and it's like, you really did kill this character. Brutally.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It's so interesting to me too with the Comics Code Authority and all that concern about like satanic panic and kids, being late for not going to school and drugs and blah blah blah. And then you have this idea that comics have to be appropriate for kids, otherwise they can't exist.
Yeah.
And so then over the years, while this is a thing that exists, you've got comics sort of evolving and bubbling in their own way. And then you have cartoons, which are becoming very much about like ingratiating kids with this is Superman, this is Batman, this is Wonder Woman, these are these characters. And then, the CGC sort of becomes not the CGC, the Comics Code Authority becomes obsolete.
Yeah.
And then you have this big dramatic shift in like, now these comics are dealing with very adult concepts.
Sure.
And the people who are picking them up are these kids who were sort of weaned on these cartoons.
And part of what I find amazing is that, like, we've got the Comics Code Authority saying, like, oh, you can't say the word zombie in comics, or, you can't mention drugs, all crime has to pay, there can't be serious consequences. Meanwhile, as a precocious reader reading my way through the kids section of the library, I learned that never, ever, ever read a children's book with either a Newbery medal or a dog on the cover. Because you're about to get some tragedy.
Good Lord.
It's like, okay, yeah, Superman's not allowed to say the word zombie, but I'm sitting here reading Old Yeller and just like, why did you put this in a
My dog's gonna die?
Okay, it's a gorgeous story about a boy who adopts a baby deer. Oh my god! Shout out to all of my fellow, Gen Xers who got traumatized by Newbery Awards.
Well, they had to slide it in somehow.
Well, comics aren't traumatizing you. I guess we'll have to find something else.
Did you ever think about the fact that our first exposure to at least in cartoons with Wolverine, he was Australian? And yet the most famous live-action Wolverine is Australian.
I would love it if that turned out to be intentional somehow.
Yeah.
Like, how does that not show up in a Deadpool joke somewhere?
Yeah, right?
There are so many things about, like, the X-Men cartoon as a kid that I go back and I look at now and I'm like, wow.
Oh, I know.
Like, just, wow. It's so funny. Like, you just see adults writing content for children, and you start to see how, like, we interact with our own childhood in that way. And, like, when I was a kid, I didn't understand it. But now I'm like, oh, that's very relatable. I get that. Like, there's an art to writing adult themes.
Well, you think about comics, media. They have constantly been I won't say at war, but it's a constant struggle to, we have to grow with the audience who started with us, they were kids at first, but they've grown. And to keep them, we have to get more mature. And at the same time, we got to find ways to get new kids in. Mm-hmm. And so it's always that shift back and forth. Somehow with so many of these movies, especially the MCU movies, they've been able to hit that balance that does both. Yeah. Like, okay, we'll take the best of the 35 or plus years of continuity and boil it down to what appeals to both audiences. But it's always the thing. Because you can come in and go, whenever they like, oh, we're killing this character off and we're starting over again. And even a loyal reader, you're like, I don't like that. I feel like you've dismissed me. But then if you've been a loyal reader and it evolves, somebody new goes like, it's too impenetrable. I can't get into it. They're always in a position of like, what exactly do we do here, and how do we make it fit along that line?
There's a meme I've seen online a lot that I really kind of like, where someone's trying to explain, like, all right, how do I get into Daredevil? Well, okay, well, first you got to start with, Born Again. Well, actually, no, you've really got to start back and go read the Harlan Ellison one. Well, really, you got to go read this art.
It's Charlie from It's Always Sunny with the board with
Pretty
all
much.
the strings.
Whereas somebody's like, all right, so how do I get into Naruto or One Piece? You start with Volume 1, bro.
And it's so funny though, because I think for years there was always this idea that like you can't bring in new characters. You can't introduce new characters into these classic
Characters can't age out and die and be replaced.
Exactly. And I was really thrilled to sort of be a part of this moment in comics where that kind of shifted and changed a little bit with Ms. Marvel, with Kamala Khan, who absolutely proved that, like, yes, Ms. Marvel was a property that already existed, but you can create a new character that is more relatable to a future generation that will also be incredibly endearing to a generation of fans who love Carol and who loved Marvel before her. And that was really mind-blowing to me, because I was really thrilled to be able to get on the internet and be like, you're all wrong.
Oh, I know.
It can be done.
Or like Jaime Reyes as the Blue Beetle.
Absolutely, yes.
I love it that they had all of that happening at once, enough to make a team, the champions, with Miles Morales and Kate Bishop. And,
your Young
and
Avengers.
Sam, is it Gonzalez?
Oh, God, the Young Avengers.
Nova. And the Vision's daughter. Just enough.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? They've brought in these new characters, and even though they are, attached to older ones, but they have their own stories, and they can build and do new things with them, and this is great.
Yeah.
It's capturing the same energy that like the Titans had when they they did the George Perez era, and they were introduced, Garfield Logan and Cyborg and Raven and whatnot, where it's like, all right, yes, these are all mostly sidekicks, but now we're gonna see them growing up, and what do the sidekicks do when they're no longer sidekicks? What do they do when they get older and they're no longer the plucky preteen tag along?
Yeah. I love that too. I love the idea of like having this conversation in like 25 years with a Gen Zer and having them be like, oh, Kamala Khan was my introduction into comics.
Sure.
Or even, and this is just talking superhero titles, right? One of the greatest things that the comic industry is also doing to stay relevant is you have a lot of queer and diverse people telling coming of age stories through comic books as a medium, because they're more accessible to neurodivergent kids, because they're because it's just an amazing medium. And I really love the idea that, like, even if superhero comics aren't the bee's knees in the next 25 years, which I think they will be, I think they have staying power, but even if they're not, you're still going to have these moments where people, younger people are able to say, like, this is the book that changed my life. This is the comic book that changed my life.
Yeah, they'll have these stories like we do.
Yeah.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks for watching and just enduring us going back through our childhood.
Are you filled with nostalgia?
A little bit. I've been rejecting nostalgia because I don't like the overload of it and the way it's being sold to us with every single thing. But this was fun. I gotta admit, this was fun.
Yeah, it's a nice little trip down memory lane to the tune of the 1990s X-Men opening theme. You hear it. Everyone hears it.
Oh,
now.
they do.
Well, signing off from Crossover Event, I'm Martin Thomas, and you can find me over at Double Toasted.
I'm Danni Danger, and I'm here on Screen Fanatic all day, every day.
And I'm Harris O'Malley. You can find me at drnerdlove.com.
Yeah. Please subscribe and like us, and tell us what was your entry into comic books down below.